Hey, 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 this is BA, and welcome to WD Gann, the Tunnel Through the Air, Part 3. Okay, and you may want to view Parts 1 and 2 before you view this part, and that way, this part will make more sense to you. But that's up to you. That's your decision. This trilogy is dedicated to the true seeker, the wiser one who seeks out the truth. Page 302, Robert shifts gears. Robert Gordon was made colonel in the early part of 1930. It is significant when Robert gets his promotions because he changes character, like he was Robert Gordon Cottonhead. Well, here he's colonel. And then, as an example, later on he becomes supreme commander. Those are all important. Page 304. But soon realized that somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean or in the Gulf of Mexico, there was a secret base of supplies. It is in the Gulf of Mexico. This is significant. He's telling you there's a base, a start point, if you will, out in the Gulf of Mexico. Page 304. Because New Orleans fell within 3 days, there was a panic on Wall Street and stocks crashed rapidly. Again, this book was authored in 1927, and Gann was spot on. Look what happened to the Dow after March 20th, 1931. Okay, now I talked about this and we explained this in part 2, that what this is actually a forecast for the Dow Jones. Well, it's for the stock market, but the Dow is what we have the data for. Page 310. Finally, when Cairo, Illinois was reached, the U.S. had perfected a new invention for dropping chemicals from airplanes into water and then discharging them using an electric current, the chemicals hundreds of miles away. Okay? So this is significant because this is talking about a specific elements tied in here. This is not the only place he mentions chemicals or discharging. All right, so you would have to connect those in. Page 313. To attack St. Louis and continue the advance up the Mississippi that enemy was making for Chicago, that the enemy was making for Chicago and the Great Lakes, to form a line across the U.S. Well, okay, didn't Gann use lines? So what point on a chart is Chicago, as an example? What point is St. Louis? Okay. The United States officers knew now that if they held out, Chicago would be completely annihilated because England's giant bombing planes were able to destroy every building and kill every living soul. General Pearson called all the commanding officers together, and they quickly agreed that the enemy outnumbered them 50-1. See, now you would think, oh, that's terrible. It's a terrible tragedy. No. Another descriptive here of the Chicago attack is 50-1, and it's key. It ties in with other parts in the book, you see. Okay? So these things that people read when they read Tunnel, and he puts it right there in front of you, all right? And actually, the 50-1 is a code. I'm not going to get into what it is, all right? When he puts this stuff in there right in front of people's faces, but they're looking for something like to flip the page and says, here's the formula to the stock market, A, B, C, D. Okay, I found it. No. He knew that some people would read this, with ulterior motives. So he put the truth in this stuff, but he makes it a little difficult to get to for the untrained eye. Page 332 and 333. What we now need, and need more than anything else, is a tunnel through the air. With such a tunnel and noiseless, invisible planes, so that we can pass through the air without being interfered with or harmed, and without being seen or heard, our victory is assured. Now we have a connection between the tunnel and invisible. Okay, and that's important connection there. Okay. He asked for the use of the largest building in New York, the Mammoth, and wanted the entire top floor of this 110-story building at 42nd Street and Broadway. His wishes were immediately granted. It's hard to believe this, but the building is used in 3 different ways. It's very significant. It's used in 3 different calculations. Page 337. Always something. Okay, page 337. On arrival, he proceeded at once to put the top floor in order for the demon of death to be moved in. Colonel Kenilworth and another assistant were sent at once to the Adirondacks, to the secret hiding of Marie the Angel of Mercy, to test out this giant Ezekiel airplane and bring it to New York City. The machine for distributing the sleeping gas, which would reach a radius of 700 miles, was made in readiness on the top floor of the building. This 700 miles is obviously a descriptive, okay? Here we have, now think about this. Here we have sleeping gas, which puts people to sleep for 7 days, and it would reach a radius of 700 miles. Okay, well, obviously, with this sleeping gas, the number 7 is important. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to add the keyword sleeping gas to our notebook and write down the page numbers and what it says about it each time it's mentioned. This 700 miles is obviously a descriptive, but could it be 700 of something else, not miles? That's a very good question. Could it be 700 of something else and not miles? Page 338. The demon of death was tested out and found to be in good working order. For many months previous to this, all the large cities had been kept in darkness because they feared night attacks. 2 things here. Note that the demon of death was not given to all the planes, and that here he connects it to night attacks. Okay? So this is important. Like I told you in part 1, this is a book of connections. And so many people, they read this and like, okay, well, the demon of death, that could be, and they list out, 5 million things. It could be my shoe size squared with the roof of the ceiling. You know what I mean? Just crazy stuff. You don't do that. You say, okay, I got this thing here. What does it connect to? And this is a very important part. This is really how to bust tunnel. Tunnel is a puzzle, okay? And you have to put the pieces together. And anyone that has done a puzzle knows that certain pieces will connect to certain other pieces, okay? So it's a puzzle. It's like an onion with multiple layers, okay? Very important concepts here, okay? So note here that the demon of death was not given to all the planes, and that here he connects it to night attacks, and that's important. Page 341. These plans had been worked out years before, and there was no question but what the machines would work successfully. This gives indication of this having something to do with past years before. And see, what I told you about is Tunnel was written in 1927. It's actually a forecast. It's much more than that, but at a minimum, it's a forecast, you see. So he means these plans had worked out years before. Well, yeah, because the cycles repeat from the past, you see. Page 341. Less than 30 days from the time that he ordered work started on the machines, they reported that the machines were completed and ready to test out. Less than 30 days. What's less than 30 days? Could it be... Page 345. He had just completed another new invention, which he called the radium ray. With this ray, he could locate anything in the sky 75 to 100 miles away. He had the radium ray machine in readiness to search the sky for the first attack that night. Interesting that the radium ray is used at night, you see. Page 358. In June 1932, the enemy decided to make the attack on the eastern part of the United States. This June 1932 is a vague date. Usually when Gann does this, like gives you a month, he doesn't pin it down, that there's something happening astrologically during the month. What you need to do is see what else this connects with, which will have an exact date at some other time, and then check back to June 1932. Think of, how does this connect? How do I get this actual date? Is it listed between two things that kind of zeroes me into a week or something? You know what I mean? Page 366. Now that's just a little bit more than a circle. She thought of that's a little bit more than a year. Same thing. She thought of Supreme Commander Gordon naming his great ship Marie the Angel of Mercy, and then realized what was in his mind at the time, that the sleeping gas should be named the God of Mercy. This is a major tie-in. It's trying to explain some of the coding. Also note the page number and how many days are in a year. Okay. Page 367. The enemy has attacked New York from 4 sides, more than 100,000 strong. The demon of death has done its work. The tunnel machines had performed a miracle. More than 50,000 aviators are sleeping in our nets. Some great discovery has made a painless victory. Edna, your normal wife, performed the painless Herculean task and played her part in the final stage of the great victory. Those two numbers are very important but coded, you see. He wants us to see 150, which is, of course, half. As stated earlier, the Demon of Death is different when Edna uses it compared to when Robert Gordon uses it. Edna calls it the Spitfire, which is another indication it is different. She does this twice in the book. And remember, I gave you the rule on repeats, okay? Page 368, turn into Ezekiel 5:2. He read, "Thou shalt burn with fire a third part in the midst of the city when the days of the siege are fulfilled. And thou shalt take a third part and smite about it with a knife. And the third part thou shalt scatter in the wind, and I will draw out a sword after them." Okay, very key part in the book. It ties a lot of things together. This is really a very important part. Page 372, 1,290 days were to be added to the time the war broke out in Europe in 1928, and the 1,335 days, being 45 days more, the Blessed Jubilee days will follow from the time the war ended in 1932 until the great celebration and signing of the peace and establishing the brotherhood of man. He's telling where to anchor this, okay? And this is very important. If you have gained insight from my videos, subscribe so you can get the latest on my free market calls, forecast, commentary, and teachings. Knowledge is priceless. And hey, this is BA reminding you that you can succeed. Bye-bye.